One important thing to remember is that there is uncertainty in all public opinion polls. The reason that there's uncertainty is public opinion polls are based on a random sample. And you can't really know for sure whether or not the sample taken randomly was a good one or a bad one. Pollsters, political scientists, statisticians have a variety of ways to try and guess whether or not they had a good sample, but it's impossible to know. But the thing that I want you to know is that public opinion polls do not measure public opinion. If you wanted to measure public opinion, if you wanted a very precise accounting of what the public thinks about a particular issue, a pollster would need to interview everybody. And that's just really expensive to do. Calling everybody and recording their opinions would be very, very difficult. So what public opinion polls do is they estimate public opinion based on a random sample. And so what winds up being critically important in understanding public opinion polls is answering the question, does random sampling work? And I will submit to you that the answer to that question is emphatically yes. And more importantly, you use random sampling all the time. And to explain why that is the case, I'm going to talk about two things that you may not do. Well, one of them you probably do. Making spaghetti sauce and having your blood taken. So let's start talking about making spaghetti sauce first. Now you may be wondering, what does making spaghetti sauce have to do with random sampling? I'll explain. For those of you who are vegans, I apologize, but I'm going to be talking about making spaghetti sauce with meat. Okay, but I don't want to offend your sensibilities, but it's easier for me because this is part of my experience, because I do make my spaghetti sauce. In order to make spaghetti sauce with meat, right, the first thing I do is, if I'm cooking it with sausage, is I put the sausage at the bottom of the pot and I brown it. So you got to heat it up and you brown it to make sure it's all cooked. And then once it's browned, then you can pour your tomatoes in with the tomato sauce in there, not ragu, but just like canned tomatoes where it's just diced tomatoes. And you pour all the tomatoes in there. Sometimes I'll add 1 can of ragu, but in any case, not ragu, but something like that. I'll add that in there as well. And then I put spices in there, garlic and pepper and more garlic, because I'm a fan of garlic. And the meat's in there, the tomatoes are in there, the spices are in there. And then I turn it on and I let it simmer for a really long time so that all of those flavors get mixed together. But at some point, after it's been simmering for a couple hours, I want to get an idea of how it tastes. So what do I do to taste the spaghetti sauce to see whether or not I did a good job? Well, I'll go ahead and take a spoonful of the spaghetti sauce, what's right at the top, and I'll taste it. Now, for those of you who have cooked spaghetti sauce, you know that if you let spaghetti sauce sit and simmer for a while, if it has meat in it, at the very top of the pan, you'll see a thin layer of clear liquid. That's not water, that's liquefied fat. So when you go to taste your spaghetti sauce to see how it is, you don't want to scoop it from the top and take a sip, because you're basically going to be sipping mostly liquefied fat. You probably throw up into your spaghetti sauce and have to start all over again. So what do? You stir up the spaghetti sauce. You stir it up, make sure all those tastes and flavors are all mixed in together. The meat's going to be sitting at the bottom. You want to stir it around, because really when you go to taste it, it's like the meat's at the bottom, then the tomatoes, and there's a whole bunch of liquid. You want to stir that all in nice and good so it's all floating around. And then you're going to take a little bit of a taste. You're going to stick a spoon in. You're going to take a taste. And if it tastes good, what are you going to think? And that's good spaghetti sauce. Well, I want you to think about what you're doing. In this case, the population that you're interested in is your pot of spaghetti sauce. And all you're doing when you stir it up is you're making the contents of the pot random. You're randomizing the content of the spaghetti sauce. And then when you put the spoon in there and you pull out some from the very top after you stirred it up, you're just taking a sample. You're taking a random sample of the population, in this case spaghetti sauce, and you're going to taste it. And you're going to make an inference based on how it tastes about the whole population of the spaghetti sauce. And it doesn't matter if you're making just a small amount or you're making a large amount. The process is exactly the same. As long as the contents are randomized, you stick a spoon in, take a taste, and you're going to make an inference from the spoon to the spaghetti pot. If it tastes good, you're going to be like, man, that's good spaghetti sauce. If it tastes terrible, you might add some things to the pot. Maybe you add some more garlic, or maybe you add some pepper. Maybe you do something else, let it simmer for a while, and you're going to do the same thing again. Stir it up so the contents are in random order. Take a little sip. Take a little spoonful out. Take a sip. And again, all you're doing is taking a random sample from the overall population. In this case, your population is your spaghetti sauce. You're using random sampling. That's all you're doing. It's random sampling. It's the same thing with when they take blood. Have you ever noticed that when you go into the doctor's office or the phlebotomist and they're taking blood, they don't take all of it? They don't take a huge amount out. Like you're sitting there and they're like slowly taking it and you're kind of like turning into jelly in the chair, and they say, don't go anywhere. And you're like, how can I go anywhere? What do? They stick a needle in your arm and they take a sample, a random sample of the blood that just happens to be coming by at that particular time. And then based on that random sample of blood, they make an inference about the overall health of your body, the things that they're looking for. That's random sampling. Random sampling is very effective, and the reason we do it is because it works. Because it works. And so that's one thing I want you to keep in mind, that not only does random sampling work, but we use it all the time in our lives. Now, one last thing. I want to talk about public opinion polls, and then we're going to come to how to interpret public opinion polls. So the information that I'm talking to you about right now, don't worry about memorizing it right now, because you're going to use it in the next video, and that's where it's going to become important. In order to understand public opinion polls, you have to know that every public opinion poll has two statistics associated with it: a margin of error and a confidence level. So what is the margin of error? The margin of error represents the amount of uncertainty that there is in the estimate. Remember, public opinion polls don't measure public opinion, they estimate public opinion. Well, the margin of error represents the amount of uncertainty in the estimate. There's a way for pollsters to reduce uncertainty. The larger the sample you do, the less uncertainty there's going to be. Right? The larger the sample, the less uncertainty, the less likely you're just going to get a really odd sample. But the problem is, the larger the sample, while it reduces the uncertainty, it costs way more money, because you've got to call more people and have people call them up, record their opinions, load up those opinions, analyze those opinions. It's just more expensive. So there is a margin of error in every poll, and the good polls tell you what the margin of error is. They also tell you what the confidence level is. The confidence level is the confidence that the estimate falls within a certain range of uncertainty. Now, I'm sure that sounds complicated. It is complicated. What am I talking about? It is complicated. And so don't worry about this right now. In the next video, what I'm going to talk about is how to properly interpret a public opinion poll taking into consideration the confidence level and the margin of error. And there, I think you'll be able to make sense of this. And if not, then post questions on the discussion board and I'll try and answer those questions. The one thing you're not going to need to know is how do they calculate the margin of error and how do they calculate confidence levels. This isn't a statistics class. You don't need to know that. You just need to understand how to interpret it, and you will be able to do that.